I went camping alone to clear my head after quitting a warehouse job that had worn me down in ways I did not notice until it ended. The job had kept the days loud and repetitive, the nights short, the body sore. Late September 2016 felt like the right moment to disappear for a few days. Early fall still carried warmth during daylight, with cold held back until after dark. Northern Idaho offered enough forest roads that a person could drive for hours without seeing anyone. The plan had no structure beyond driving until the noise in my head slowed. The clearing appeared without warning after a long stretch of gravel road. No sign marked it, no numbered site, just a narrow turnoff where grass gave way to dirt and pine needles. The spot sat slightly lower than the road, hidden by thick trees. Someone had driven in before, tire marks pressed into the soil. The ground inside the clearing was flat, packed down as if tents had rested there recently. No fire ring showed, no blackened stones, no ash. That felt odd but not alarming. People sometimes avoided fires. Tall pines surrounded the clearing on all sides. Several trunks showed bark stripped away from about waist height to a little above shoulder level. The marks ran long and straight, vertical gouges with rough edges. Sap had dried in thin amber streaks. The wood beneath looked fresh, pale against darker bark. Elk came to mind first. The region supported them and fall brought movement. The thought stayed comfortable until closer inspection showed the scrapes too uniform, too deliberate. Elk damage usually looked chaotic, angled, paired with hair. None appeared here. The air smelled clean with a sharp resin edge. The ground felt firm beneath boots. No trash lay around. No rope, no cans, no cigarette butts. That also felt unusual for a hidden spot near a road. The place looked used and then erased. The tent went up near the center where the ground felt most even. A small pad went inside. Gear stayed minimal. Food stayed sealed in a hard container left inside the car, which remained parked nose out toward the road. That choice felt instinctive rather than planned. Afternoon passed with quiet. Birds moved through the trees in quick bursts. Wind pushed high branches without touching the ground. The clearing stayed still. No distant voices carried. No engines passed. The road might as well have vanished. As daylight faded, temperature dropped fast. The forest darkened early under thick canopy. Dinner came cold from a pouch eaten while standing. No fire. No light beyond a headlamp kept low. The bark marks seemed different at dusk. Shadows deepened the grooves, making them look deeper than before. The height aligned with a standing person more than an animal. The thought arrived unwanted and stayed. Night settled without ceremony. Darkness filled the clearing until edges disappeared. The tent fabric held the faint glow of a headlamp before darkness returned. The forest noise changed. Insects quieted. A distant owl called once and stopped. Sometime after full dark, weight pressed into the ground beyond the tent. Not close enough to touch, close enough to feel through soil. A step landed, then another, slow and even. No snap of branches followed. No leaves rustled. The sound came as dull compression, earth meeting skin or soul without debris. The steps moved in a wide circle. Each footfall took its time. When the body inside the tent shifted, the steps stopped. Stillness followed. The forest held its breath. When movement inside stopped, the steps resumed. Same pace, same distance. That pattern repeated. Shift, stop, stillness, continue. The rhythm showed attention. No stumbling occurred. No hesitation. Whoever or whatever moved outside knew the ground. Time stretched without measure. Muscles tightened. Breath stayed shallow. The urge to look out fought with the sense that light would only mark position. The headlamp stayed off. Darkness remained complete. At one point, the steps came closer. The pressure grew heavier, closer to the edge of the clearing. The ground dipped slightly near the tent, and the sound changed with it. Still no branch broke. The soil held the weight cleanly. The presence circled once more and then stopped again, longer this time. The pause lasted until limbs cramped from staying still. Eventually the steps moved away, retreating toward the trees. No sound marked entry into brush. No scrape, no snap, just the fading absence of pressure. Sleep never came. Waiting filled the hours until the sky lightened. Before sunrise, the tent unzipped without concern for noise. Cold air rushed in. Light showed gray and thin through trees. Packing happened without order. Gear went into the car in loose piles. The ground near the tent held marks not noticed before. Impressions pressed into soft soil just outside the flattened area. Feet without shoes. Toes spread, heel narrow. The prints faced the tent. Several sets overlapped as if someone had stood there a while. The prints did not belong to me. Boots left a different pattern. The bare impressions showed skin detail, faint ridges, weight distributed forward. No blood marked them. No cuts. The soil temperature could not have been comfortable. The warmth of the previous day would not have carried through the night. The stripped bark made sense in that light. The height matched reach. The vertical grooves aligned with repeated motion, as if something hard had been dragged down the trunk over and over. Not antlers, a tool perhaps, or practice. The clearing no longer felt accidental. The flattened ground looked measured. The lack of fire ring looked deliberate. Smoke drew attention. Fire left evidence. Someone using the place often would avoid both. Leaving happened fast. The car started on the first turn. The road felt longer than before. Every bend held tension. No one appeared. No movement showed in the trees. Days later, curiosity returned once nerves settled. Research followed. Northern Idaho held scattered reports of people living rough far from towns, avoiding contact, using Forest Service roads to move between spots. Some had lost housing. Some avoided systems. Some had reasons. One article mentioned a man arrested after being found barefoot near campsites, skilled at moving through brush without noise. He had survived years that way, sleeping during the day, watching at night. Bark stripping had been used to harvest inner layers for makeshift cordage and to practice cutting with a blade kept sharp against living wood. Fire had been avoided to keep smoke from drawing attention. The barefoot detail stood out. Shoes wore out. Feet adapted. Ground could be read better without rubber. Sound traveled differently. The clearing fit that pattern. A place off the road but hidden. Used often. Erased carefully. Watched closely. The footsteps at night had not rushed because there had been no need. The circling had measured threat. Movement inside the tent had been tracked through vibration, not sight. The stopping had shown patience. The prints had been left because leaving quickly before sunrise mattered more than hiding them. Nothing supernatural had been there. Just a person who knew the forest better than I did, protecting a space by making presence known without confrontation. The fear came from not understanding that boundary until it was crossed. The trip ended that morning. Camping alone stopped for a long time after. The job never returned. The clearing stayed unnamed. The road number faded from memory. The lesson remained clear and complete. Some places look empty because someone works hard to keep them that way. We planned the trip for the colors. October in British Columbia carries a narrow window when the larches turn and the air sharpens without snow sealing the high ground. 4 of us took a long weekend and chose a hike-in site we had all used before, nothing remote enough to feel reckless. The trailhead sat off a maintained forest road. The map showed a steady climb, then a descent into a basin with a small lake and established tent pads. We packed light but not careless. Food was sealed. Headlamps were fresh. The forecast called for cold nights and clear days. The hike started clean. Leaves lay thick on the ground, yellow and brown, damp from recent rain. The forest smelled of wet needles and soil. We moved at a steady pace and did not talk much. The sound of boots on leaves made a soft drag that blended with the wind. About an hour in, the trail narrowed and the trees closed. That was when I noticed another sound layered with ours. It was not loud. It was the sound of leaves being pressed and released, timed to our steps. When we slowed, it slowed. When we stopped to drink water, it stopped. At first, I assumed another group behind us. The trailhead had 2 cars when we arrived. I expected voices or metal clink. None came. When we started again, the sound returned, closer this time. It did not wander. stayed just off the trail to the right, always a few steps behind. I felt it more than heard it, a sense of weight moving with intent. We tried to test it without speaking. We paused again, longer. The forest settled. Birds moved. Wind brushed branches. Then a single step pressed leaves a few yards away. Not rushed, not clumsy. It sounded careful. When we moved, it followed. When we lowered our pace to almost nothing, it matched us. The distance closed by small amounts. I could tell because the sound sharpened, less muffled by brush. I checked behind us several times and saw nothing but trees. The trail curved and dipped, cutting sight lines. The light shifted as clouds passed overhead. The air cooled. The feeling in my chest tightened. Not panic, more a focused alert. We continued downhill toward the basin because turning back would mean passing whatever kept pace with us. I wanted open ground and known landmarks. As we descended, the sound drifted closer to the trail. Twigs snapped at knee height, then higher. There were no animal cues. No snorts, no huffs, no scamper. Just wait. Upright wait. I knew how bears moved and how deer fled. This was different. Felt measured. When one of us whispered, barely sound at all, the steps answered by closing distance. Leaves pressed faster for a few seconds, then slowed to match again. The basin opened in late afternoon. The lake reflected the sky in dull steel. The tent pads sat among sparse trees with clear lines between them. I felt relief stepping into open space. The sound stopped at the tree line and did not follow us out. We chose pads close together without discussing it. We set up with efficiency, hands moving without wasted motion. I kept scanning the edge of the forest. The light faded fast as the sun dipped behind the ridge. As night settled, the temperature dropped hard. Frost edged the leaves. We cooked quick meals and ate standing. I noticed how the forest noise thinned. Insects went quiet. Wind dropped. The lake lay flat. The silence felt pressed, like the air before snow. We packed food into a bear can and secured it away from camp. We did not linger by the fire ring. We did not build a fire at all. After dark, the sound returned. It came from the brush between the pads and the lake, not heavy enough to crash, not light enough to be small. It moved upright. The cadence carried through the ground. I felt it through my boots. The steps were slow and deliberate. They circled, not close enough to touch gear, close enough to define the edge of our light. No animal noises came with it. No breath, no warning calls, just footfalls and the slide of fabric or bark against itself. One of us aimed a headlamp toward the trees. The beam caught nothing solid, just trunks and leaves. Then, higher than expected, 2 points reflected back. They were not low like a deer. They sat at shoulder height and held steady. The distance between them was wider than normal for wildlife we knew. The reflection blinked once and shifted sideways without dropping. The light moved and the reflection vanished. My heart rate spiked, but my thoughts stayed narrow and practical. I tracked where the sound moved and where it did not. It stayed in cover. It did not step into the open. It did not rush. It did not retreat. It felt like observation. The steps continued for a long time. I checked my watch by headlamp and saw the hours creep forward. The cold deepened. Condensation froze on tent fabric. Every so often the steps paused, then resumed closer or farther, as if mapping our responses. We stayed still. We did not shout. We did not chase noise. The forest gave us no relief. Sometime after 2, the steps came closer than before. Brush pressed in a line parallel to the pads. I heard weight shift and a low scrape like a boot sole testing ground. The sound stopped near the bear can, then moved away without touching it. That detail mattered. An animal driven by food would test it. This did not. At 2:30 a.m. we packed. Headlamps stayed low and steady. Hands moved with purpose. Tents came down quiet. Poles slid free. Fabric folded stiff with frost. The sound stayed back while we worked, not approaching, not leaving. It felt like a watcher allowing an exit. We left the basin in a tight group and took the trail uphill. The forest swallowed our light. The sound followed again, this time farther back. It did not try to pass us. It matched our pace. When we slowed to navigate rocks, it slowed. When we sped up on clear sections, it closed distance briefly, then settled back. I kept counting steps and breath to stay calm. Halfway up, the Saond drifted off to the side and stopped. We reached the trailhead before dawn. The road lay empty. Frost glazed the gravel. We loaded gear and drove without stopping. In the weeks after, I tried to explain what we experienced without reaching for stories. I spoke with a conservation officer I knew through work and described the behavior, the lack of animal cues, the upright movement, the eye height. He did not dismiss it. He explained that some people live on the edge of parks and move through them quietly. Some watch camps to judge risk. Headlamps can catch reflective strips on clothing or gear at odd heights. 2 points wide apart could be reflective tabs on a pack strap or jacket seams. The careful movement fit someone trained to stay unseen. The interest without theft fit someone guarding space rather than seeking food. I later learned that illegal harvesting had been reported in that basin that year. Trail cameras found and removed. Temporary shelters discovered and cleared. People using the forest as cover move differently than hikers. They learn to mirror pace. They test reactions. They avoid light. The explanation did not make the memory softer, but it made it complete. We were not followed by something unknown. We crossed into someone else's working ground at a quiet time of year. They chose to watch and then let us leave. The forest itself stayed what it always is, indifferent and vast. The danger came from a person deciding what to do with us. That decision went our way, and we walked out under our own power before dawn, cold, tired, and intact. I went camping alone because I needed quiet. Nothing dramatic had pushed me there. Work had worn me down. My sleep felt thin. I wanted a few days where time slowed and nothing asked for my attention. I packed on impulse and drove without a plan. By late afternoon, I turned onto a narrow forest road that did not appear on my map. The gravel had weeds growing through it. Tire ruts cut deep lines where rain had eaten away the center. I followed it until the trees closed tight and the air cooled. I found a flat clearing near a bend in a creek and stopped. There were no signs, no fire ring, no trash. The ground showed faint marks where tires had once pressed mud flat, but leaves had settled over them. Felt unused yet not untouched. I set up my tent before dark. The forest held a damp smell of bark and soil. Insects hummed without rhythm. The creek moved slow and shallow, stones visible through brown water. I filtered water and cooked simple food. The light faded in layers, not sudden, just a steady dimming. I checked the area again and noticed something I had missed. About 30 yards into the trees, parallel lines ran through the leaves. They were straight and evenly spaced, like something heavy had been dragged more than once. The marks ended near the creek and did not continue on the other side. I told myself it could be logs or a vehicle stuck in mud months ago. I did not follow them. Night arrived without ceremony. I sat near the tent and listened. Wind moved high branches but not low ones. Small animals rustled, then stopped, then started again. I felt calm at first. The quiet did what I hoped. My shoulders eased. I lay down early, zipped the tent, and turned off my light. The forest settled into a pattern that almost lulled me to sleep. I woke after midnight to the sound of something touching nylon. Not scraping, not tearing, just pressure. The tent wall bowed inward near my feet, then relaxed. I held still. My breath slowed without effort. The sound came again, closer to my side, like a palm resting, then lifting. I waited for an animal smell or sound, but nothing followed. No snort, no steps, no panic noise. After a minute, the pressure stopped. Leaves shifted a few times, and then the forest returned to its earlier rhythm. I lay awake for a long time. I ran through reasonable causes. A deer might brush past. A bear would make weight and noise. A raccoon would scratch and sniff. None fit cleanly, but fear stayed low. I slept again near dawn. Morning showed nothing unusual. The tent had no marks. The ground around it looked the same. I ate, drank coffee, and walked the creek bank. Upstream, I found boot prints in the mud. They were deep and clear, not mine. The tread was worn smooth at the heel. The steps ran along the water, not toward it, and then cut into the trees. I stood there longer than needed. I could tell the prints were fresh. The edges had not collapsed. They were made after rain the night before. I tried to judge how many hours old they were, but I had no training for that. I followed them for a few yards and stopped. The forest ahead looked thicker, darker, quieter. I did not want to commit to knowing more. I told myself people walk forests all the time. Hunters, locals, someone passing through. I decided to stay one more night. I packed my food carefully and hung it high. I checked my phone. No signal. I did not feel trapped. I had a car. I could leave any time. The day passed slow. Light filtered down in shafts. The air stayed cool. I read, walked, and kept busy. I noticed another thing I had missed. On a tree near the clearing, a rectangle of bark had been cut away. The wood beneath was pale. The edges were clean, made by a blade. The cut sat at chest height. It did not mark a trail. It did not face the road. It faced the clearing. I touched it and felt the sap still tacky. That evening I cooked early. I did not sit long. I zipped the tent before dark and kept my light off. I wanted to hear without giving myself away. The forest sounded the same at first. Then a pattern broke. Footsteps moved slow on leaves. They stopped, then started again. They did not circle. They approached from the creek side. I could hear weight shift heel to toe. The steps paused near where my pack leaned against a tree. I smelled nothing. I heard no breathing. The steps moved away, then returned closer. I kept my body flat and still. Time stretched. I could not tell how long I lay there. At some point a shadow crossed the tent, blocking starlight. The tent wall bowed again, this time near my shoulder. The pressure held longer. The fabric creaked. I felt the shape of fingers through nylon, spread and careful. The hand slid, tracing the seam, then lifted. Leaves moved away. The footsteps retreated into the trees. I did not sleep again. I waited for dawn and packed as soon as light allowed. My hands shook, but my movements stayed steady. I checked the ground. New prints marked the soft soil around the tent. They matched the ones by the creek. They came close and then moved away, not rushed, not panicked. I loaded the car and drove out without stopping. I reached a gas station an hour later and used the restroom. In the mirror, my face looked drawn and pale. I considered calling someone but did not know what to say. Nothing had happened that could be reported. I drove home and tried to forget. Weeks passed. The memory dulled but did not fade. I searched online maps for that road and could not find it. I told myself roads change, maps lag. Months later, curiosity pushed me back. I wanted to put an end to the unease. I planned a day trip, no camping. I brought a camera and kept my car doors unlocked. The road was easier to find than I expected. A recent storm had cleared leaves. Tire tracks cut fresh lines. I followed them deeper than before. The clearing looked the same, but the tent spot held a dark stain in the soil, oval and matted, like something heavy had rested there long after I left. I did not step closer. I walked toward the creek and followed it downstream. I found the structure by accident. It sat tucked into a bend where the land dipped and trees leaned inward. It was not a cabin. It was a low shed built from scrap wood and corrugated metal. Tarps covered the roof. A generator sat nearby, rusted but intact. Plastic barrels lined the back. The ground around it showed many boot prints. Some were mine from weeks earlier, overlapping in places. The drag marks I had seen led straight here. I did not approach. I used my camera zoom and took photos. On the side facing the clearing, a rectangle of bark was nailed to a post, pale wood facing out. It matched the cut on the tree near my tent. Inside the open doorway, I saw hooks on a beam and a stained tarp folded on a table. I could not tell what the stains were from. I did not need to. I walked back the way I came, slow and quiet. Halfway to the car, I noticed fresh boot prints crossing mine. They were deeper, the tread clearer. They had not been there minutes before. I did not run. I kept a steady pace. I reached the car and drove without looking back. I went straight to a ranger station miles away and reported what I found. I showed the photos. The ranger listened and took notes. A week later, I received a call. The structure had been removed. The barrels contained chemicals used for illegal processing. No one was found on site. They believed someone had been living there on and off, using the forest as cover. The ranger said people like that watch their surroundings closely. They mark trees. They notice newcomers. The explanation settled the worst parts of my fear. The hand on the tent was a person checking, not an animal testing. The careful steps were someone deciding. The marks were signs, not random. I understood why nothing else happened. I had not challenged, stayed quiet, left early. I had been assessed and dismissed. I have not camped alone since. I still go outside. I hike busy trails. I camp with others in open places. I learned that isolation is not empty. It belongs to whoever claims it first. The forest did not mean me harm. A person did or could have and chose not to. That knowledge stays with me, clear and complete, without mystery. I did not write my name anywhere that night. I was moving fast across the state and keeping costs low. June in New Mexico made that easy. BLM land stretched wide and empty, and I had slept on it many times before without trouble. I drove until the road thinned into 2 ruts and then into nothing at all. I parked where the ground leveled and the desert opened around me in every direction. Low hills rolled away under a clean sky. The sun sat high and sharp. The air felt dry enough to pull moisture from my mouth with every breath. I chose a spot a short walk from the car and set up as the light softened. The ground was hard-packed dirt with scattered stones and brittle grass. I laid my pad, rolled out my bag, and stacked a small pile of wood gathered from washes and deadfall. The wood snapped clean when I broke it. Smelled dry. I dug a shallow pit and built a simple fire. The match flared. The kindling caught. Flames rose clean and bright. Then, within minutes, the fire thinned and collapsed into itself. The coals dulled and went dark as if starved. There was no wind. The air stayed still against my skin. I rebuilt it with care. I adjusted the base and lifted the wood to let air pass. The match worked again. The flame climbed and then faded. The same thing happened a 3rd time. Each fire died the same way, not blown out, not smothered by smoke, just losing life. I checked the wood again. I checked the pit. I felt heat rise, then vanish. I told myself the soil might be wrong, holding cold, pulling heat down. I scraped deeper and tried once more. The result did not change. I stopped trying. I ate cold food and drank water. The sun dropped fast behind the hills. Shadows stretched long and flat. The desert shifted color from tan to purple. As dark settled, the space around me felt larger than before. The silence sharpened. Insects that had hummed during daylight faded away. No night birds called. Even the wind stayed absent. The quiet pressed inward, complete enough to notice the sound of my own breath. I lay on my pad and watched the sky fill with stars. The Milky Way cut a pale river overhead. I felt small but calm for a while. Then a sense crept in that I was not alone. It did not come with sound or movement. It felt like pressure on the back of my neck, like eyes resting where I could not see them. I shifted and scanned the dark. The edge of my fire pit held a faint glow from the last coals, just enough to sketch a ring of light. Beyond it, the ground dissolved into shadow. Something stood just outside that ring. I could not see shape or detail, only the absence of space where space should be. It did not move. It did not breathe. It did not make noise. The feeling of being watched deepened until it filled my chest. I stayed still and tried to anchor myself in reason. People crossed this land. Ranchers, surveyors, others sleeping cheap like me. A person could stand there and choose not to make a sound. I reached for my flashlight and swept the beam across the dark. The light cut hard and white. The space where the presence stood stepped back in one smooth motion. No footfall followed. No brush of fabric. The beam caught nothing but dirt and stones. I lowered the light and the feeling returned, closer than before. I did not hear approach. I only felt attention. I kept the light on after that, angled low. The beam held the darkness at bay in a narrow cone. The rest of the world stayed black and silent. Time stretched thin. I checked my watch by the light and watched minutes slide by. Each time I moved, the sense of being watched adjusted with me, like a weight shifting but never leaving. At some point I slept, not deep, not long. I woke to the same silence and the same pressure. I did not see the presence then. I only knew it had been there. When dawn came, it came fast. The desert brightened in stages, shadows peeling back from the ground. The quiet lifted with the light. Insects returned in small numbers. A bird called once, then again. I stood and stretched, stiff and cold. That was when I saw the ground. Around my sleeping spot, long drag marks scored the dirt. They formed loose circles, overlapping, like something had been pulled around me again and again. The marks were not fresh from wind or animals. They were clear and deliberate. The edges were sharp. Stones had been shifted aside, not scattered. The circles stayed close, never crossing the pad, never touching my gear. I followed the marks outward and found where they began. A length of frayed rope lay half buried in a wash. The end knotted around a piece of scrap metal. The metal bore rust and old paint. The rope showed where from use, fibers polished smooth. I imagined someone holding that rope in the dark, pulling it slow, testing distance, tracing my outline without stepping close. The thought settled heavy but solid. I packed fast and loaded the car. I drove until the land rose and the road improved. Later, at a ranger station miles away, I learned about the area without asking questions directly. Notices on a board mentioned illegal grazing and equipment theft. Someone had been using the land as a work site, dragging metal and rope to clear ground, burning brush in shallow pits. Shallow pits that starved fires of air. Fires that died without wind. The explanation fit each piece without stretching. A person had been there before me and after me. They knew how sound carried and how silence unsettled. They chose not to speak or move loudly. They used the dark and the quiet to watch and decide. The drag marks were not meant to harm, only to measure, to see if I would react. I did not return to that stretch of land. I still camp cheap when I travel, but I choose places with traffic and shared use. The desert did nothing to me that night. It held its silence and its stars. A person did the rest, and I walked away with a clear answer and no need to invent one. I went alone because I wanted to test myself before summer. March in Montana still holds winter tight, but I wanted one night out before the trails filled again. The plan was simple. Hike in a few miles, camp near a tree line, hike out at first light. I picked a stretch of public land far from towns, drove until pavement gave up, and parked at a snowed over pullout. Snow had fallen the night before, light but steady. The sky stayed low and gray. The temperature hovered just below freezing. I strapped on my pack and stepped off the road. My boots cut clean prints into untouched snow. The forest swallowed sound fast. Pines stood tall and thin, their branches heavy with white. Every step made a soft crunch that echoed back at me in short bursts. I stopped often, not from fatigue, but to listen. Nothing answered. No wind, no birds. The quiet felt deep but not wrong. The hike in took longer than planned. Snow hid rocks and uneven ground. I moved slow and careful. I crossed a small meadow where the snow lay smooth and unbroken. My tracks formed a single line from one end to the other. I remember noticing that because it felt rare to see something so clean. By late afternoon, I reached the edge of the trees again and chose a spot with some cover from the slope. I set my tent, stamped down snow, and packed the walls tight. My breath showed thick and white. I cooked fast, ate little, and drank enough water to avoid trouble. As the light faded, the temperature dropped another notch. Night settled without drama. The sky cleared and stars came out sharp and bright. Cold sank into the ground and climbed up through my pad. I slept in layers and woke often, each time checking the tent walls and the dark beyond. I heard nothing but my own movement. No steps, no animals. The silence stayed complete. At some point before dawn I woke and could not fall back asleep. The cold had stiffened my joints. I waited for light, watching the faint glow build through the fabric. When the sun finally touched the tops of the trees, I packed up. The snow had hardened overnight. My footprints from the day before looked sharper, their edges preserved by the freeze. I stepped out and turned toward the way I had come in. I planned to follow my tracks straight back. That was when I noticed the second set. At first, it did not register. I saw my prints and assumed that was all. Then my eyes adjusted and picked out another line beside them. The second set ran close, almost touching mine, stride for stride. Same length, same spacing. The boot tread matched mine down to a small nick on the outer heel that I recognized from where. The tracks stayed parallel, not overlapping, as if someone had walked beside me with care. I crouched and examined them. They were as clear as mine, pressed into the same snow, hardened by the same cold. They were not older. They were not newer. They had been made at the same time. I stood still and looked back toward camp. Only my own prints led there. No second line branched off. No sign of approach or departure. The second set began partway down the trail and continued for about 50 yards. My pulse stayed steady, but my thoughts narrowed. I checked for explanations. Could I have made them myself? Could the slope have caused a double impression? I stepped forward and back, tested angles, tried to recreate the pattern. Nothing fit. My gait did not produce a mirrored line. The snow showed no signs of sliding or collapse that could copy a print. I followed both sets slowly. The forest remained quiet. The air felt thin and sharp. After about 50 yards, the second set ended. The prints stopped in open ground where the snow lay flat and unmarked. No turn, no fade, no disturbance beyond the last clear boot shape. My own tracks continued alone toward the meadow. I stood there longer than I should have. I scanned the trees, the slope, the open ground. Nothing moved. The quiet pressed in again, heavier than before. I felt exposed in a way I had not the night before. I did not run. I kept walking, eyes up, steps measured. When I reached the meadow, the second set did not appear again. My single line cut across the white as before. The snow beyond stayed untouched. The road came into view through the trees, and relief followed, sharp and sudden. I reached my car and loaded gear with shaking hands. Only then did my heart rate climb. I drove without stopping until I hit pavement and signal returned. Days passed before I tried to understand what happened. I went back over the route in my head. The timing, the snow, the terrain. I talked to a local search and rescue volunteer I knew through work, careful with details, framing it as a question about tracks. He did not laugh. He explained how a person can step into existing prints to hide movement, matching stride and pace. He described how someone following close behind could place their boots alongside another's tracks when snow is soft, then lift away before leaving a trace of departure if they step back into the same impressions. The explanation fit, but only barely. It required someone to follow me in silence, in cold, matching my pace exactly, then stop in open ground and erase their exit by backtracking into my prints before I noticed. It required patience and intent. I later learned that the area had issues with illegal winter hunting and people avoiding detection. Snow hides sound. It preserves evidence too well for those who do not know how to move. Those who do can erase themselves almost completely. That knowledge did not bring comfort. It made the night feel closer, sharper. Someone had been there. They had chosen not to be seen. They had walked beside me for a time, close enough to match every step, then let me go. I never camped again after that. I still hike, but only day trips, only busy trails. The forest itself did nothing wrong. The snow told the truth. It showed me that solitude is not empty, and that sometimes the most frightening thing is not what you hear in the dark, but what walks with you in silence and leaves no mark when it decides to stop.